This is the Everyday AI Show, the everyday podcast where we simplify AI and bring its power to your fingertips. Listen daily for practical advice to boost your career, business, and everyday life.
Should you stop using Google and use something like ChatGPT instead? Well, I personally think you should, and our guest has some great takes on that today as well. So my name is Jordan Wilson. I am the host of Everyday AI. This is a live daily show on LinkedIn. So we're streaming on social media, podcasts, Spotify, Apple, all that, and a free daily newsletter to help everyday people like you and me learn and actually leverage AI, because there's so much going on, but it doesn't mean a lot if you can't actually use it. So before we talk about that and talk about, can you actually replace Google to grow your business? Let's run through kind of the top news stories of the day. And as a reminder, if you do have a question and you're joining us live, please make sure to drop a comment for me or the guest later. So let's quickly go over what's going on in the world of AI. So a new BBC article today is talking about how students are now just switching to AI to learn new languages. So not using those traditional routes of tutors or even apps anymore. So we're at a weird stage where even now apps, iOS apps or Android apps are kind of old school now. So, but there's some drawbacks. So make sure you subscribe to the newsletter and read that to if you're interested in that one. Another big story today is talking about the people who are being trained to, the people who are training AI are actually outsourcing their work to AI. So that's a very interesting one. And you're creating these kind of feedback loops, or a lack of a feedback loop, where people are using AI for reasons where you should actually be having a human. So that's a very interesting problem, I guess, that is I guess we're all going to reap the downsides of it on the back end. So our third news story for the day is a new study from the University of North Carolina showing that women's jobs could be hit harder when it comes to AI job loss or job displacement. So it's actually saying that nearly 80% of women's jobs could be disrupted or automated by AI. So again, more from that in the newsletter that goes out. But yeah, it's a pretty in-depth study just looking at how a lot of the roles that women are playing in the workplace are more likely to be disrupted by AI. So that is the news for today, but I'm going to go ahead and tease something for the end of the show. We are going to be announcing our next giveaway. So if you want to enter that, again, go to youreverydayai.com. So announcing our next giveaway and the winner of our first one. So with that, let's start to talk about, can Google be replaced with ChatGPT? So joining us today, we have special guest. If you're on LinkedIn, you've definitely seen our guest today, Dr. Bryan Sagray. He is the founder of Dr. Bryan Sagray Coaching, LLC. Thank you for joining us.
Of course. I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, tell us a little bit about your new coaching business. People who do follow you online, you are sharing about the journey. But for those maybe that haven't, talk a little bit about what your new coaching business is and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, sure. Of course. So when I retired from my first career as a surgeon, I took some time off, helped run the family business, sell the family business, and then kind of fell into this role as the founder of a performance coaching business. And basically what I do, or what I help people do, is, I really think anyone can benefit from a coach in their life. I certainly have, right? So I'm kind of a product of my product. And what we do is help people overcome fear, limiting beliefs, get unstuck, whether it's, weight loss, trying to deepen relationships, make more money, be healthier, whatever that may be. I've kind of been through it before and I've seen it all. And I help them sort of rewire their brain, this sort of concept of neuroplasticity. And it's been so much fun, and I'm just here to help people. So it's been great.
That's amazing. So first of all, how long ago did you kind of officially get the new business off the ground?
Yeah, so it's funny. So I feel like I've been coaching people for years, but just haven't been charging them. But I officially launched the business, I think this past Tuesday was 8 weeks. So it's only been 2 months so far.
Wow. Wow. Well, congrats on that. And talk a little bit about kind of the journey of going, from obviously you said that you're had a kind of a background, helping with the family business and helping through that transition. But, what's it like to start a business in the day and age of AI and ChatGPT? What was that like to go through that process?
Yeah, I think honestly, launching a business today as like an entrepreneur, and doing it, the non-traditional, virtual way without brick and mortar sort of, there's no capital that you really have to invest. And there's so many free tools out there online now with AI, with image generation, with, there's so many different things that you can do without having to put in or invest in any money. And so I think it was an incredible journey because I was able to launch this business essentially without really any investment other than my time and my effort. And so it really makes it pretty, I don't want to say simple, but it makes it where it's much more doable than it would have been, 10 or 15 years ago, where you had to create this pipeline and have a physical building and do all of, get a lot of advisors. And nowadays you can turn to a lot of different tools and do stuff on your own, and just go all in.
hmm I kind of remember starting my business about 5 years ago, and I found myself Googling a lot, or going on YouTube a lot, trying to find out some of the basics. How much time did you spend in, ChatGPT as an example, or other, AI search programs when you were starting out?
I would say I spent like a fair amount of time in ChatGPT. I really quickly realized, and this isn't a plug at all, but I really quickly realized that the paid version is substantially better than the free version, and it's not expensive. So I quickly upgraded. And what I did was, ChatGPT is so fast at returning information, but it's really succinct and it's really concise, and it'll even give you references and links and all this stuff. So what I found out really quick was, I'd have multiple monitors up and have a kind of a split screen setup, and I was literally using Google to search for stuff, and then I was using ChatGPT sometimes to search for the same search query just to see how it would compare. And I quickly learned that it was just returning information that was sort of more polished and already usable, in the sense that it really gave me what I needed quicker, and in a format that was just much more user friendly. So I wasn't taking information and like edit copying it from
hmm
ChatGPT, but I was using it sort of as like, not even a virtual assistant, but just as like an extension of me that was making tasks much quicker. It was pretty remarkable.
Yeah, that's a great point, because the more that you use ChatGPT and the more you kind of train it up with what's good and what's not in terms of output, it does kind of become, or it can become, an extension of yourself. So talk about like what role that played even for you as someone obviously with a background, kind of like what you said, hey, I've always been kind of coaching people, but now it's an official business. What did that mean for you to have almost like an extension of yourself, or an executive assistant, kind of, so to speak, in those early days of your business?
Yeah, it was really cool. I mean, even to the point where, as you mentioned, you can have a dialogue with ChatGPT. So if you put in a search term, or ask it a question, and it returns something that you don't like or whatever, you can then redirect it and have a conversation with it. You can ask it to do something in a different tone or whatever.
Mhm.
And so what I found was, creating what we call like models. So there's different types of coaching models, like, the framework or the structure that we'll use for a particular client, whatever we're working with them may be. And so I could ask it to help me create a model for someone who is looking for time management techniques, or how to overcome procrastination or whatever. And it would literally pull together like a proprietary model. And then I could tell it, no, that's not really my coaching style, or I have this type of a background versus that. And it would literally tailor this model specifically for me, that then is like a proprietary method that I could
Mhm.
implement in my business. So it was pretty remarkable.
Yeah. And I think you already gave one huge key to making this work. Like, if you want to use ChatGPT in lieu of Google or in addition, I think the most important thing is you have to get the paid version, right? Because otherwise you're working with information that is before 2021. But so aside from that, if someone else is interested in saying, okay, yeah, I spend way too much time Googling things and going down rabbit holes, aside from using the paid version of ChatGPT, what's maybe another tip or two that you can offer people in your experience to get the most if you are trying to use this instead of Google?
Yeah, I think the most important thing for me is, you know, I at the very beginning obviously had a little bit of skepticism, wondering, okay, because as you know, right now we call it AI, but there actually is a human behind it sort of coding a lot of this. And so it's not true 100% automation. And so what I told myself early on was I need to have some way to check what it's returning or to quote, make sure that it's accurate information. So what I did at first was I used them, like I said, side by side, and I made sure, and I turned out pretty quick, especially with the paid version, that what it was returning was accurate. And so that's a big tip for me, is that if you're worried at the beginning that maybe it's not returning information that's completely accurate or useful, to check it. But I learned pretty quick that what it was, returning was useful. So I think for me, I had a separate system to check, which was helpful.
Yeah, yeah, that's so important. And to follow up on that, yeah, like, there are actual humans training ChatGPT, right? So I think that is important. It's not just a bunch of, robots and scrapers. I think when people hear, oh, AI, they just think that there's no humans involved, but there are humans involved too in training and building this. What was your kind of one moment that you kind of stumbled upon in using ChatGPT almost as your home base versus Google? Was there a one moment that you said, oh, okay, doing it this way is going to save me countless hours?
Yes, it's funny. So there was, and it actually wasn't even professional or business related. So I think I was in La Jolla. I don't remember where I was. I was somewhere in California visiting a friend, and I'd pull out my phone, and I'd go to Google and ask it, like, what are the top restaurants like in this area, and it would search like based on a geo tag of where you were. But instead of doing that, I pulled up the ChatGPT app, which they have the full app version now, not just like where you have to pin the homepage. And I went into the app and asked it the same thing, and it was incredible. Like, it pulled together a list of like all the top restaurants where I was, like their addresses, phone numbers, everything. And it did it so much faster and cleaner than even Google with, like, putting the map and all this stuff. And it was so quick. And it was funny how I was like, all right, let's go to this one. And so for me, it was like a revelation on even just simple day-to-day stuff like that. It was so much quicker, so much more accurate, and just streamlined. Then I said, okay, then I'm switched. I'm hooked.
Yeah. I think even for me, one of the biggest things about, researching is productivity. And I think that in general, like when you're using Google to research something, these websites make money, right? So they make money by retargeting you. They make money by showing you ads, so many ads and pop-ups and related stories. And sometimes you can just get distracted. Is this something that you found that, by using ChatGPT instead, you're just more focused, more efficient, and less distracted?
Yeah, no, I do think that it definitely helps with, the term people throw around a lot nowadays, decision fatigue, I think, because, I'll have up maybe like, the LinkedIn window, and then I'll have up ChatGPT, or I'll have up ChatGPT in like, a word processing document. And exactly like you said, instead of getting all these notifications or multiple pages of responses, or, the ads following you on the sidebar, you don't really get any of that. And so it's almost like having open a journal where there's no distractions. And I turn off notifications and stuff. And so it makes it much easier for me to not have a bunch of other information coming in that I'm having to process, which nowadays that's a big, something that leads to burnout, I think, and that really frustrates people, is we're constantly bombarded with information. And I think people don't realize how distracted they get. Like literally every minute you're getting pulled in a different direction. So it's let me really focus because it's just a clean page. You know what I mean?
Yeah. For those people, and maybe let's say that they're an entrepreneur, solopreneur, or trying to build a business, and maybe they're, for whatever reason, they're hesitant to jump into ChatGPT. What would you tell those people? Even just given your own experience, what would be your takeaway message for them?
Yeah, I think there's lots of really good free, obviously, YouTube videos you can watch where people will sort of show these side-by-side comparisons. And I would just encourage them to go get the free version, because just see what it can do. Just what I did at first with the free version was literally, I would have this technique where I would, have a list of what I thought the most important things were for my day. And so for like about a week, I would get up in the morning, and instead of going to Google or doing research my normal way, I just used ChatGPT to see if it could replace like what I normally would do otherwise, and sort of did like a test run. And I found out pretty quick that it was probably going to be my go-to. And so I would just tell them just to dive in and just see if it works for you. And I think you'll be surprised to find out that it'll replace a lot of things.
Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more. Even, through my own personal experience, kind of the same thing that you're talking about doing, side-by-side windows. It is something that from a productivity and efficiency standpoint, it's literally just on another level. So one last question that I have for you, kind of, we talked about, using ChatGPT kind of in lieu of Google, and how you even use it to kind of help start your business. So, looking forward, you're 8 weeks into, your new coaching company. How do you see yourself using ChatGPT now to grow the business? Like, what is that way that you're really looking forward to using it to grow?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm starting to actually really have to leverage it even more, because as the business grows and as the client and the consultation grows, what I'm noticing is a lot of people are wanting, when I'm talking with them about these different methods or recommending certain books or tools or exercises, people are actually wanting like PDFs or like handouts of this stuff, right? Or graphics or images or diagrams of these graphs and all this stuff. And so what I'm finding now is that it's actually helping me tremendously, where I can put together, like, if someone needs tips on how to time block properly, right? Just as a random thought, I can use it to generate a document really, really quickly that is like best tips and practices for how to do that. So for me, moving forward, it's looking like it's going to be really helpful to generate actual physical, things that I can give my clients, handouts, graphics, images, things they can do at home for exercises. Yeah, it looks like it's going to be great for scaling for sure.
Yeah, that's another great point that you bring up, that it's not just to get from 0 to 1 or 0 to 5, but you can really have some compounding impact once you're using it in your day to day. So we made it. Dr. Bryan Sagray, thank you so much for joining us and talking about the different ways that you can use ChatGPT to grow your business and replacing Google. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, it was my pleasure.
All right. So just as a quick reminder and a quick announcement, go to youreverydayai.com. We're going to have a lot more follow-up from the conversation that we had today, some useful links, and even a tutorial video in there as well. And I did say that we would announce this at the end of the show. So our next giveaway for Your Everyday AI is going to be a 6-month plus subscription. So if you heard some of the things that we're talking about today and you're like, I only have the free version, you can win 6 months and 6 training sessions from myself. So if you really want to know how to use it, maybe you don't want to shell out the $20, although I think it's definitely worth it, make sure to enter this contest. So that's it. We hope to see you next time on Everyday AI. Thank you.
And that's a wrap for today's edition of Everyday AI. Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and leave us a rating. It helps keep us going. For a little more AI magic, visit youreverydayai.com and sign up to our daily newsletter so you don't get left behind. Go break some barriers, and we'll see you next time.